Hello, folks. Welcome back to Build Beyond with Tecton. Today, I'm your host, Burt, Carlisle, and we're down a couple. Lehi and Nathan are not here with us, so I'll be doing an interview with Nephi, one of the upcoming fan favorites. So, Nephi, we came together in this venture, but what we'd like to do today is go back to your childhood a little bit and see where you came from, let the listeners get to know you a little bit. And so we're going to start with your childhood. And I think everybody's heard that we grew up on a dairy farm. So, but I'd like to just start by asking, like, how old were you when you started milking cows and going to work and started to have some responsibility, whether you liked it or not?
3
years.
No, I think you guys started dragging me out of the house in the mornings to go milk. Right before we left the pink house, so I'd have been 6 or 7.
6 or 7.
Yeah.
I think that's close to when I started.
That's when I started trying to hide to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as soon as they figured you could feed a calf and you could milk a cow.
That's right.
So, so at the age of 6, you kind of started milking and mostly homeschooled, or did you attend much school?
I attended 1st and 2nd grade in a private school, and then we did attempted homeschool for 3 years.
So that would have taken you to 5th.
Yeah. It would have taken me to 5th, but when we went back to school, I started in 4th grade and did half the year there, the oldest kid in the class.
So one thing that we all have in common as partners and brothers here is the education, or the lack thereof. But it, like, I would say it holds us back a little bit in some ways, but in other ways, like the work ethic we have and stuff. What's your thoughts about what that done for you to be able to just learn how to work, and that's how you make a living, is your work ethics and productivity?
Start and work, and especially growing up on a dairy and having a lot of big brothers that expect nothing less than working your ass off. Definitely gave you a great work ethic. As far as schooling goes, like, there's sometimes I wish that I knew a little bit more grammar and things like that we never learned, you know. And as you age and you're out on your own, you learn a lot of stuff that you would have learned in school. So you might have been a little bit behind the times, but at the end of the day, you know, you learn your reading, writing.
Yeah, I feel like lack of education, you kind of just learn to get by, and then you kind of learn and grow. I mean, that's what I've experienced, is after you gain a little experience and you learn things that, like you said, you would have learned in school.
Yeah.
So after you were born in 87 or no,
89.
89,
Yeah.
sorry. And so that was a couple years before we moved to Scipio, so you wouldn't have remembered that. So
I was 3. Moved in 82 or 92.
So it would have been about 94 or 5 when you started working and milking cows as a young kid.
Yeah, about that. I remember, and maybe it's because of pictures, but I think I remember some of the move. I remember Squat being in a cage.
Oh yeah, Squat. Let's
one of
talk
my
about
first
Squat,
pets.
the goose.
Well, I don't know how to talk about it, and the reason why I've made it in my head that the pictures that make me think I remembered it is because there is a picture of Squat in the cage.
Yeah, in the moving, pacing.
Yeah.
No, I think you remember that well, because I remember when that goose got stepped on by the cow.
Yeah.
And how devastating that was. That was your pet goose. Anyway, moving on. Everybody has a pet goose on a farm, I guess.
Yeah.
So let's go up to, we was in Scipio, all kind of working, doing our thing till about 2002, I believe. Talk about the move and moving from Scipio. We kind of sold the dairy, or rather gathered up and took and merged the dairy with the dairy that was at the creek. What was life like for you during that time, around the 2002?
Ooh, nothing real impactful. That's when we went to school finally again after first and second grade is when I moved down there. But I was one of the ones that moved. We moved right away, basically because we already had the house. We just gathered our stuff and went down and went to school, while some of you older guys stayed there and ran the dairy. Left all the animals behind. I remember I had a lot of rabbits at the time. I was in charge of them. Dad told me either they gotta go or you're staying here to take care of them.
And you didn't want to stay milking?
No, I didn't like milking. I think we all despised it in our own ways.
Yeah. Those rabbits became wild, free rabbits.
Yeah, they did.
Some of them. So after we were moved down, what year was it, or when did you start getting into construction, when you needed to start earning an income?
So I got a choice. I kind of got some trouble at school. I got a choice to straighten my attitude out, or I go to work. And
what about the trouble? What kind of trouble did you get in at school? Because
trouble?
Yeah, was it like?
Well, as you know, it was a very strict religion. Me and my friends were in sixth, 7th grade, and we started getting curious. So we started looking up naughty words in the dictionary. We started looking up like what sex meant and things like that. So that's where it started. And then I was labeled as a troubled kid and I couldn't do anything right. So when I would get an undeserved F on a daily report card, because we used to get a report card every day on our attitude. So, I started getting undeserved
Fs.
Yeah, I started disagreeing with the authority figures there at school.
So that's what kind of was like, okay, we're going to have to pull you out of school.
Yeah. The principal there.
And did you go work at the dairy the local dairy at all, or did you?
I did that during the summers when we wasn't in school and after school. I milked cows and stuff. I did that for as long as I think a year or so. Just the summers and nights.
So
working there.
Around 2005, March of 2005, we lost our dad. He had a stroke. Talk about that just a little bit and the impact at the age that you were at. I believe you were 16 almost, or 15. You had just turned 16 right before he passed away.
Right. I would just turn.
So now you're a 16-year-old hardworking young man without much education and a little bit perverted. But what was
I wasn't perverted.
You was just curious, which we all should have been. Like, we weren't getting proper education when it come to that kind of stuff anyway.
No, absolutely not.
But anyway, let's talk about the impact and the experience that we had when our dad had the stroke. There was a week there where we got to spend time with him, but he couldn't communicate with us. And
I think we all have our own little story to tell the last moments there. Without getting into it too in depth, and it was obviously devastating. It was hard. You feel a little bit lost, But as a young kid, you know, the wonderment of what's next is strong and looming. I think it affects everybody differently, obviously, but the way that it impacted me was to step up and try harder to be a source of income and help out with the family after that. You know, obviously after the mourning and everything, it definitely was emotionally super, super hard. It's like anybody in their parent dies
Well,
that they love, respect, look up to, mentor.
Yeah, and we all had a great relationship with him, and it was, I like what you said. Mentors. We all had our own personal experience through that, and it was a rough one, but also one that I always feel like I wouldn't trade for anything. So after Dad passed away, then we kind of moved in with an uncle, and around that time, like it was probably 2-3 months after our dad passed away that we moved in with an uncle. It wasn't because I was there. I was a 24-year-old young man and easily could have taken care of a household and supported the mothers and stuff like that. But that was a kind of a policy that I wasn't worthy to be the boss or the leader of any family, let alone my own mother and siblings.
Well, the way I think and see it is at that time they were so worried about control, and they had control over that uncle, and they didn't have. Instead of making that control, which they probably could have, you know, as faithful as you was at the time.
Oh yeah, I could have easily been controlled.
Instead of making that connection, you know, they chose to just place you under a household they already had control over, you know, and monitor and
so
make sure we're paying our tithing.
And that puts us in there. And then after we moved in with our uncle, then with his help, we started the Vertex Log Crafters, and you started working there with us.
No, I was gone before that. Yeah, and I don't remember. Oh,
that's right.
I was only there 4 months.
Country. So when did you start with High Country?
So I went to Alco for about 1.5 years. I was 15 when I started for High Country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I worked at Alco for a while.
So Vertex never started till after you got kicked out of the religion.
Correct. We was all still working for High Country.
The experience of getting kicked out, you're a 16-year-old boy, young man. Obviously you had, you know, lack of an education at 16. We didn't mingle a lot with the world, so to speak. So let's talk about how that was and how you got through that trial shortly after your dad died. Then the religion turns its back, kicks you out.
Well, the experience in the feedings getting kicked out, like we're fear-baited very much down there, and this is a big bad world with a bunch of horrible people. Everybody's bad, you know. Everybody that's not part of it is the devil, you know, like Bobby Boucher, the devil.
That's right.
But so it was in the moment, the most devastating moment in my life, getting told I had to come out here on my own and all of that. That turned into the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah. And that it's just so for the listeners, like imagine being 16, that not really even ever attending public school. You have a really small world and you just get sent away. You're 16. You've that's a rough patch. But
yeah, you experience the world through some goggles that would place on your eyes for sure from birth.
Yep.
You know, and
they call it, you grow up like a calf in a stall.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You don't know how big the pen is or the arena or the world or any of it. Yeah. So once do you want to talk about why you were kicked out, or do you just want to let everybody draw their own conclusions? So this, I'll tell the audience why I'm asking is because your nickname's Butters.
Uh-huh.
And this, yes, and this, the reason for being kicked out kind of has something to do with it. So in your words, and that you tell that story, how you got the nickname Butters.
Well, we was working for High Country, building a log home out of town. And it was one of the first times I even remember like staying out of town without a parent and stuff, and just hit puberty, 16. Super curious. Wasn't exposed to anything with girls, like, you know, being able to communicate with them. You know, that was kibosh. You didn't play with your classmates.
Their phrase was that girls are snakes.
Yeah,
treat them like snakes. Don't touch them. Don't talk to them.
You.
Don't. Yeah, they drill that into you.
So being a curious little puberty case at 16, I was staying at a hotel, and there was a 19-year-old college girl there as the clerk. And after everybody was settled down and in bed, you know, I left. I don't know if I had to have an excuse or if you was all asleep or what. I don't remember that, but
I know I had to have been asleep.
Because we was staying in the rooms. There was like 2 beds, foursome, you know, we were super cheap like that. But I worked up the courage to ask her if I could see her boobs. She immediately
worked up the courage.
Thought,
you got balls, dude.
It was hard, you know, but if it was, I mean, how else was I going to see it? You know? And so she immediately thought that it was a bet or a trick and somebody was going to come out, you know, from behind the corner and with a camera or something. Of course, you know, I told her no. And I explained to her, like, where I was from, you know, how old I was, my curiosity, solely curious, you know, I ain't never seen, like, even... And I don't know if it was just excitement on her end or pity.
Well, that's what was you on a pity party with
I didn't say it in the terms of pity. It was more so of, like, to convince her it wasn't a bet or somebody's not hiding behind a corner or something. That's how I remember it. But it didn't take long, and she admitted to it and took me in the back there with all the washers and stuff. Anyway, so she shows me, and, you know, one thing led to another, and I ended up fingering her, and so it's just the excitement and stuff, you know, your business happens fast, whatever. Like, I ran out of there.
And just to be clear, that nothing, just finger and seen boobs, that's all
that's all. Yeah.
Just so the audience knows, that's all that happened.
Yep. Okay. And then premature ejaculating.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all.
So you're
happened.
Like, oh, this is embarrassing and run. Well, that's gotta.
Well, I mean, yeah, of course.
Well, I'm sorry.
Not only embarrassing, but guilt hits hard quick when, you know, you're raised a calf in a stall. You know? Guilt, embarrassment, everything. So anyway, we were told to confess our sins or else we'd be kicked out anyway. So that was something that I confessed, trying to, you know, do what I thought was right. Hence why it was so devastating. Well, fast forward about 4 years, there was South Park. This is after I was clear out of it and everything. There was a South Park episode where Paris Hilton's trying to buy Butters as their pet, and they get sent to the room why their parents are negotiating or figuring out terms of how much she has to pay or whatever, and she just kind of flops down on the bed, and Butters reached over there and pokes her between the legs. And then it was obvious, later he's like, oh, she has a squishy thing between her legs, and pleading why he shouldn't be sold. Well, my family picked up on that, and ever since then, they tied the two together, and ever since then, I was Butters.
Well, that's a funny story. I love the story. I hope you don't mind me trying to get you to tell it, and thanks for telling it on the podcast for the entire audience to hear. Is there anything about that area that you the era right after and before Dad died, when you get kicked out? So between 2005, 2007-ish, like you got kicked out.
Got kicked out. I got a job. Lehi got me a job with Zitting Brothers, so I went to work for them. I was kind of a little fuck up when I was there. I dropped a remote off of 3 stories. They had me running a crane and stuff, and I ended up dropping a remote, and then I got demoted from that and drove a forklift, and I took out an AC unit on the side of one of those.
So more struggles. More struggles.
And they ended up putting up with me. I never got fired for it, but I tried to work hard. I tried to, but it's a lot. You're still trying to figure everything out. It was a lot. I don't think I was all there all the time, and I'm starting to see all these new things. They're turning out not to bite me if I look at them, or sting if I touch it type thing, like interesting things. So I don't think I was all there, hence the screw ups. But no, we went to Vegas. We worked down there for what I remember to be about 8 months, working for Zitting Brothers in Vegas, straight out of the crate. And that was a crazy place to go, You just have to walk out the door
we
were
taught to close your eyes as you drive through Vegas to make sure you didn't see any the stripper advertisements and stuff like that. So Vegas was very it was taboo. Just to drive through Vegas was taboo for us.
Right. I remember driving through there with Mom and Dad and getting told to close my eyes.
Yep, me too. Yep. So, did you ever get to go with Dad down to Tulare to the farm show?
I never did.
Yeah, that was a good time. For some reason, I thought almost everybody at least got a trip down there, but you were pretty young because we did that during the 90s.
I remember staying at the dairy in Scipio with Leland. I was his little helper.
Helped him while we went.
While you guys went.
I
was old enough to
remember
the trips, but
never.
I don't ever remember going. Maybe I did when I was young enough to not remember, but I don't remember.
It was a long drive, but a really cool show if you're into farm equipment and that kind of stuff. Technology was booming back in the 90s, so it was amazing to just go down there and watch what the new equipment they were coming out with, and we're still putting milkers on by hand and stuff. I mean, we weren't milking by hand, but so many modern.
I remember you guys always coming home and bragging about the roller coaster, Buffalo Bills.
Oh yeah, Buffalo Bills.
That's what I was jealous of.
Yeah, that was a super highlight of those trips, and we did that 2 or 3 times in I got to experience it a couple of different times. Those were the fun times with Dad. He was amazing to spend time like that with. Get him off the dairy and yelling at us, and it was a little better.
When you couldn't see the string he was pointing up.
That's right.
Pointing out from the loader.
So this brings you back to your about 2000. Well, let's move on from the from where you was working with the Zitting brothers, and what did you guys do after that?
We found out that we had an uncle that was building log homes based out of Cedar City. So we got in contact with him, and he obviously offered us money, and at the time it was way better than I was getting. So I was all over it. All over going to build log homes.
And you got to work with some of your
relatives,
good friends and relatives.
Yeah.
Relatives
Well, eventually, at the time, anybody that he worked with, that worked for him at the moment, I didn't know. So it ended up being like the good friend, when my good friends from my childhood started trickling out, then it ended up being that way. So it ended up being a really good thing there.
So, well, that brings us about to the time where I come back into your life as a pitcher.
That's when I worked for Vertex. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about what that was like because I was your big brother before when you left. That, like, I would just say this to the audience: that was hard. Like, I almost blamed myself, like the big brother that let him out of the hotel room that caused this whole thing to happen to his life. Like, I don't hold that over my own head, but it was hard at the time. And one of the hardest things was to watch you get sent away thinking that what the hell are you going to do? Like, you had not a pot to piss in. And I knew you wasn't like well-versed in the world, or like, I didn't know what you were going to do.
Well, I got fortunate enough to go live with Lehi, and even though he was only barely 18 at the time, I was 16, almost 17. He already established kind of the way he wanted to run everything. He had a mentor and everything, and everything reflected. I owe a lot to my success as a young man, like realizing that I need to duck my head and work and make a living, even though I was that young. I obviously needed help out here and there for the purchase of things and a place to live, everything. He was a huge, huge figure in my life to show me the way. I owe a lot of credit to
Lehi. Yeah.
And it was to the point where we bounced off of each other, financial, if something come up and one needed help, and it worked out great. Like I feel like we really banded together in that, and I can't express the gratitude that I have that he cared enough to make sure I was doing the right stuff,
Yeah. That's
thinking
awesome.
the right way.
So then you came up and worked for Vertex, and we were doing log homes. And Vertex was a company that I had started with our uncle. And then I left and carried on with Vertex. And you came and was one of our best working employees, and you kept everybody. You was always hard on everybody on the job, which I kind of appreciated, because I knew that at least two of the guys would never be standing around if they were working with Nephi. So
I tried.
You were good at driving people, but it had to be the right
I was good
people.
at pissing people off.
Yeah, you did. You did piss people off, but I mean, it added something to the job site. It was fun to get after each other and challenge each other's work ethics.
Yeah.
So you talk about that time just a little bit. What was you're still single, and that was, how long was we working together at Vertex? From 2008?
From 2008, first 2008. I remember coming to Bear Lake for the first time, and there was snow higher than the truck. That's the way I remember it anyway. It's kind of like, when the hell did I get myself into?
There was a lot of snow.
But I was excited. So from 2008 to 2009, the end of 2009, we did that. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was the end of 2009. We built our last job.
Yeah.
Yeah. with Vertex?
Then I got a couple local jobs, stocking the shelves at the station, and then doing side work.
Did you meet any girls stocking the shelves? Just kidding. But then you doing side work. Sorry for the interruption.
I mean, I met a few girls. I think the group that I hung out with, I originally met at the dance they used to do up there.
Oh yeah,
the group of girls, and
because you were in Bear Lake at the time.
Yeah,
that's where we
Garden City.
So then, Vertex closed down at the end of 2009, and you went to work with me for a contractor that didn't pan out for very long. Yep. And then you joined the oil field.
Yep. I got lucky enough to get an offer I wasn't actively pursuing it, but I was always wondering what I was going to do with my life, always wondering like how limited I was, and, trying to figure out what I was going to do to make a living that could last. And I got the opportunity to go to the oil field, and I was 20. I was 20 at the time when I got the offer. My first day was my 21st.
2000.
It was 2011.
You'd been 22.
No.
If it was 2000, because you were born in 89.
Well, I was 21 when I got the offer. So my first day was on my 22nd birthday.
Yeah, that's what I remember. Yeah. There was something about, so.
Yeah. And, I tell you what, that was best thing ever. I was a young kid, never had more than, I think most I ever made was maybe $25,000 a year, going from that to 6 digits.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, that was in
when time.
Even when I seen, and I stayed with that contractor because my objective was to keep going down that path of for a career, and become a general contractor. So I stayed there, but I remember like you making so much money. I'm like, maybe I should have joined the ranks of the oil field.
It's tough work. And it's got a military mentality, like to screaming in your face. Like if they decide they don't like you, they're gonna make you quit by
the way they treat
drilling you. Yeah. And that's how they decide if they like you, how you handle that. So it had very much that mentality. I know it's not the same. I don't believe it's the same anymore. But it was rough to get going. But once you get going and you're making this money and you're thinking about all the things you could do, you set up a plan. I can make this much money in this much time, and then I could go do anything I want, and it never works out that way. I mean, you spend it, especially a young kid that never had anything.
Yeah. So then, the oil rigs, you excelled. You became a driller. You spent how many years in the oil field?
So I did a total of about nine years. I quit for 13 months during those 9 years. So it was almost exactly 10 years
total.
But I quit for 13 months in middle of it.
What did you do during that time?
I went and worked with Lehi. Lehi owned his own frame company, as we've talked about. I went to work.
Yeah, that's right.
Went to work for him.
So, is there anything about like the oil field that you'd like to expand upon, or do you want to? If there's any particular lessons or things that the audience.
Lessons, full of lessons. It expanded on what we've already talked about as a young age, growing up on a dairy, and then at a young age, not during those crucial years, learning years of your life, you're out working and learning worth ethics. The rigs really expanded on that, gave you more worth ethic
and fortitude. That's
absolutely.
what yeah.
Yep.
So then let's talk about where you are today when work-wise. First, let's actually introduce your family a little bit. Talk about your home life a little. You got a little farm. You got a cow. You got some other animals, some turkeys, and
no, only have chickens now.
Oh, you only chickens.
Yeah. I got a beautiful wife and 3 amazing kids, and living in southern Idaho. Yeah, 4 acres with a few cows. I like to raise my own freezer meat.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Everybody should be able to have that privilege. Yeah. Eggs and meat on your little farm. That's awesome. Sounds amazing. Do you want to talk about like the call to come to Tecton?
Yeah, I could.
Yeah. So Nate, what was that like? Nate called you and said, you want to come help me out?
Nate, during Nate's transition of the religion to out of it, then we talked off and on quite a bit, and then it kind of went cold, and I couldn't say that we was really buddy at the time. So when he called me, I was pretty surprised. When he offered me a job, I was even more surprised. I was actively trying to figure out a way to get away from the rigs, because you are spending 6 months out of the year of undivided attention to them. Like if you had family emergency or you just wanted to be home, it had to be a life or death situation to get out of work, because they already gave you time off, which, don't get me wrong, was amazing, but you're 1,000 miles away from the family for 2 weeks at a time. It takes a toll on, you miss a lot in 2 weeks. Even though you get it for 2 weeks, like they're undivided,
absolutely,
your undivided attention, it's still rough. So I was constantly actively like trying to figure out a way to keep up the lifestyle that I had, or at least not take too
that
big
you
of
was
a
able
hit.
to have on the rigs.
I was able to have, and so when he called, it wasn't an easy decision, and I'd already went down this path 3 years prior, so it was a tough decision, but I ultimately made it. And it's also one of the better decisions I've definitely made in the last portion of my life. I'm super excited. We're growing.
Yep. So you've been here just over 2 years now, right? Like, yeah, just over 2 years.
Just over 2 years is all. So in that short amount of time, I've learned a lot more.
But you've made a huge difference in the company and getting the management out in the field.
Yeah,
like
I've tried.
That's one thing that I would say. Like, you're really good at making sure the job gets done and things are managed right and stuff. So that's pretty good. That brings us up to today. Is there anything you'd like the audience to know, or any advice you'd give them, or maybe just a good life lesson you've learned to this point?
A good life lesson. I mean, you learn lots of good life lessons. You just have to keep your mind open to them. I try to live my life, live and let live. And I think that, having people push you away because of a choice that you made and something you did really makes you think about that a lot throughout your life. You know, ones you loved and ones you grow up around and stuff. And I think that no matter what you believe, no matter what you are taught your whole life, you know, you can love somebody that doesn't believe the same things that you do and be around them.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Nephi. That was a great interview. Thanks for joining us today. We'll be back again next week. Be sure to like us and follow us on YouTube and wherever else you find audio, Spotify. Make sure and share the show because we'd like to get it out there. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.